The Red Cross receives the bodies of 4 Israeli detainees in Gaza and delivers them to Israel. The first batch of mobile homes enters Gaza and the 17th batch of Palestinian patients crosses Rafah. And Egypt and Spain call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza in a joint statement. Hello there, good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock Cairo local time and you're watching Qnews. I'm Mark Summers. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. On the 33rd day of the Gaza ceasefire agreement, the Red Cross has received the bodies of 4 Israeli detainees in Qnews, southern Gaza. Red Cross vehicles arrived this morning to collect the remains, which were handed over by Hamas. Hamas ensured the bodies were transferred to the Red Cross for delivery to Israeli forces in Gaza. A large crowd gathered to witness the transfer. Israel confirmed the handover and stated that the bodies were en route to their forces. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has backed out of attending the ceremony for receiving the bodies of the 4 detainees in Tel Aviv. Israeli media reported that Netanyahu changed his mind about participating. Security checks were conducted on the detainees' coffins before being sent to the Forensic Institute. Netanyahu's office confirmed that the bodies would be buried with military honors after identification and further examination. Hamas has asserted that exchanging detainees is the only way to ensure the safe return of Israeli detainees, warning that military action or further conflict would only result in more casualties among the detainees. Hamas emphasized their respectful handling of the body transfer, in contrast to Israel's disregard for the detainees' lives. Hamas accused Israel of killing their own detainees through bombings and criticized Prime Minister Netanyahu for evading responsibility for their deaths, while claiming to have done all they could to protect the detainees. A correspondent from our sister news channel, Al Qahira News, in the Egyptian side of Rafah, has reported that the first batch of mobile homes has crossed into the Kerem Abu Salem border crossings today in preparation for entering the Gaza Strip. That comes as a bulldozer and 15 mobile homes divided across 5 trucks will be entering Gaza today. Also, the 17th batch of patients and injured from Gaza crossed into Rafah for treatment in Egyptian hospitals. In a joint statement, Egypt and Spain have expressed deep concern over ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and their risks to the region. Spain praised Egypt's role as a mediator and guarantor of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. Both countries stressed the need for a permanent ceasefire to facilitate the broad distribution of humanitarian aid and the release of detainees. They reaffirmed their commitment to supporting Palestinian services, ensuring security and rejecting any attempts to displace Palestinians from their land. Now for more on this, we cross over to the newsroom where Selma Marwan is waiting for us. Selma.
Thank you, Mark. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al Ahram newspaper managing editor Ashraf Al Ashri. Mr. Ashraf, thank you so much for joining us on Q News. And let me first start by asking you, why did Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu decide not to attend the ceremony for receiving the bodies of the detainees?
Greetings to you and to the viewers. Absolutely, there is a lot of anger in Israel starting this day, delivering 3 dead bodies of the Israeli hostages who have been abducted in the 7th of October 2023. And there are accusations towards Netanyahu that he prolonged the war and allowed the military operations in some places where Israeli hostages were located, and therefore they were killed. The Israeli media now is directly accusing Netanyahu that he has blood on his hands, the blood of these Israeli hostages, and not Hamas. The Prime Minister said actually that they were late to rescue those. The media said that they were late to rescue those hostages. Now, the families of the hostages will see the dead bodies of their loved ones, and they will say that there was an opportunity to negotiate with Hamas and rescue those loved ones, and that's all Netanyahu's fault, which is reflected on the work of the Israeli government. We have anger in the Israeli street accusing the Prime Minister and the government of killing those hostages.
Now, sir, regarding the humanitarian aid, if you can expand on the role that Egypt plays in facilitating the delivery of humanitarian aid and also the medical treatment for Gaza, and if you can explain the significance of the mobile homes entering Gaza and how they will be used exactly.
Regarding the humanitarian aid access, it has been going on since the 7th of October, and it was intensified during the past few days with the 3-phase agreement signed and implementing the first phase and accelerating the humanitarian aid flow and transferring Palestinian injured to Egypt, and the Egyptian state has 46 hospitals receiving hospitals in different governorates Egypt-wide, and there is a health care system receiving Palestinian injured, providing all health care and relief methods, and also Egypt keeps giving access to humanitarian aid flows, and the mobile homes crossed the borders today and yesterday as a result of the Egyptian pressures applied in the meeting between Qatar, Egypt, and the US and Israel to finalize the deal and enter the mobile homes, and under this pressure and holding on to our stance to finish the first phase as planned, the US and Israel accepted to enter the mobile homes so that Egypt would actually manage to achieve the reconstruction plan and provide a home or shelter to the families while the reconstruction process takes place.
Now, on the diplomatic level, during the last summit, the leaders of Egypt and Spain stressed their rejection of the Gaza displacement schemes. Can this indicate possible European endorsement of Egypt's reconstruction plan for Gaza?
Of course, since the Egyptian position was announced by President Sisi that we reject any proposals or initiatives to displace the Palestinian location regarding the U.S. proposition by President Trump, we led the Arab efforts that actually are the same as the Egyptian stance to reject the displacement. Even the allies of the U.S. in Europe, including France and Germany, rejected the displacement. Egypt led the effort, and we are outlining a proposal now for the reconstruction. And the Prime Minister of Spain Spain endorsed this proposal yesterday, and the European Union expressed a desire to cooperate with Egypt to finalize the reconstruction plan proposed by Egypt. We have a wise leadership to face any proposals to displace the Palestinian population by outlining this Arab proposal for the Gaza reconstruction, and that will be discussed in an Arab summit soon.
From Cairo, that was Al Ahram newspaper managing editor Ashraf Al-Ashri. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And now we're going to move back to Mark in the studio.
Thank you very much, Selma. Thank you for that. Now, Gaza's reconstruction will require more than $50 billion following the 15-month Israeli war. That's according to a new assessment by the UN, the EU and the World Bank. With infrastructure in ruins and the economy crippled, uncertainty over governance and security arrangements continues to hinder large-scale recovery efforts.
A recent assessment by the United Nations, the European Union and the World Bank has estimated that more than $50 billion will be required to rebuild Gaza following the 15-month Israeli war on the occupied Palestinian enclave. The Interim Rapid Damage and Needs Assessments (IRDNA) outlined a $53.2 billion recovery and reconstruction plan over the next decade, within $20 billion needed within the first 3 years. The conflict has left Gaza devastated, with over 84,000 casualties reported by local health authorities. Infrastructure has been severely impacted, with more than 292,000 homes destroyed or damaged, 95% of hospitals non-functional, and the local economy contracting by 83%. The report warns that conditions are not yet suitable for large-scale reconstruction due to uncertainty regarding governance and security arrangements in the enclave. To restore infrastructure, an estimated $29.9 billion would be required, including $15.2 billion for housing. Additionally, $19.1 billion will be needed to address economic and social losses in sectors such as health, education, commerce, and industry. In parallel, Egypt has initiated reconstruction efforts by facilitating the entry of heavy construction equipment into Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. These efforts are accompanied by a large-scale humanitarian initiative, with Egyptian aid convoys delivering essential food, medical supplies, and relief materials to affected populations. Egyptian authorities, in coordination with international organizations, are ensuring the organized and efficient delivery of aid, underscoring Egypt's commitment to alleviating the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Now, Jordan's king has warned the U.S. congressional delegation about the dangers of escalating tensions in the West Bank and Jerusalem. He stressed the need for increased international efforts to achieve a just and comprehensive peace based on a two-state solution. Jordan's king reiterated his country's rejection to any attempts to displace Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, and emphasized the importance of maintaining the ceasefire and strengthening humanitarian responses. The Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa has emphasized that ending the Israeli occupation and establishing a Palestinian state based on the two-state solution is the only path to resolving the conflict and achieving peace. Mustafa called for practical steps to implement international resolutions, particularly UN Security Council Resolution 2735, which outlines a roadmap for this solution. He shared updates on the situation in Palestine, particularly escalating violence in the West Bank, and discussed efforts for Gaza's relief and reconstruction. The UK Minister for Development at the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, Annalise Dodds, has voiced concern over the current state of Palestinian children in the occupied city of Jerusalem. Dodds added that the Israeli order to close its schools and the immediate evacuation of the Kalandia Training Center is deeply worrying, while stressing that children's access to education must continue uninterrupted. Dodds made these remarks a day after Israeli occupation forces forcibly entered UNRWA facilities in East Jerusalem, including schools and a training center, violating the right for education for hundreds of students and trainees. For the 31st consecutive day, Israeli occupation forces have continued their aggression on the city of Jenin and its camp, resulting in the killing of 26 Palestinians, dozens of injuries and the displacement of thousands of civilians amidst widespread destruction, including the demolition of burning of homes. A woman was shot in the chest and abdomen by occupation forces near Jenin's entrance, while a child and a young man were detained attempting to check on their homes. Hospitals face severe water shortages after occupation forces destroyed water lines, leaving 35% of the city residents without access. Additionally, over 120 houses in Jenin camp have been completely demolished. The Israeli aggression on Tulkarm city and its camp has entered its 25th consecutive day and the 12th day on Nur Shams camp amid military reinforcements accompanied by the demolition and burning of homes. In Tulkarm camp, the occupation forces demolished houses as part of the escalation campaign, targeting the camp under the pretext of opening a street extending from the agency area to the Balane neighborhood. At the same time, the occupation forces continue to close the gate of Jabara checkpoint at the southern entrance to the city of Tulkarm for the 13th consecutive day, isolating the city from the villages and the towns and the rest of the West Bank governorates. Israeli forces have launched a large-scale raid across several Palestinian cities and towns in the occupied West Bank. They stormed homes during the raids in Sa'ir, north of Al-Khalil, and in the towns of Tumas Aya and Silwad in north of Ramallah. The raids also targeted the New Askar refugee camp east of Nablus and the Dahaisha refugee camp in Bethlehem, where several homes were also searched. Many Palestinians displaced by the devastating war are struggling to shield themselves from the wind, cold and rain as they face dire living conditions and inadequate shelter and resources. According to the United Nations, around 600,000 Palestinians have returned to northern Gaza since the ceasefire took effect a month ago. The UN estimates that rebuilding Gaza after entire neighborhoods were destroyed will cost approximately $53 billion. Providing shelter for Gaza's residents remains a challenge as aid workers have prioritized food deliveries since the ceasefire. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has departed Madrid in Spain this morning and is now en route to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That followed the completion of his official visit to Spain, and this was confirmed by the Egyptian presidential spokesperson. Now let's get the latest developments from Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Lebanese civil defense has announced the recovery of the bodies and remains of 11 deaths from the towns of Mez al-Jabal, Khayyam, Markaba, and Deir Sayan in southern Lebanon. In a statement, the civil defense confirmed that search operations are ongoing in coordination with the Lebanese army. The remains were transferred to hospitals for medical and legal examinations, including DNA testing to identify the deaths. The civil defense pledged to continue its humanitarian efforts despite field challenges. Middle East Airlines, or MEA, has announced adjustments to its flight schedule for Sunday, February the 23rd, 2025, due to a temporary suspension of air traffic at Beirut's Rafik Hariri International Airport. That's between midday and 4 p.m. While all flights will operate as planned, some departure and arrival times have been modified. MEA advised passengers to check their updated schedules and arrive at the airport at least 2 hours before departure. The airline also urged travelers to follow internal security forces' guidance on road conditions leading to the airport. Military units have continued deployment in the southern border towns with UNIFIL and ceasefire committee after Israel withdrawal. The Lebanese army stated that Israel has not fully withdrawn from occupied Lebanese territories as required by international law and UN Resolution 1701. Israeli forces remain at border points, violating Lebanese sovereignty and ongoing attacks. Meanwhile, military units are working to restore access for residents by clearing debris and reopening roads after the destruction caused by Israeli aggression. Beijing now, and China has announced that it is making every effort to push for negotiations with the European Union. Chinese Commerce Ministry spokesperson He Yadong said he hopes that the European body will heed industry calls and promote bilateral investment cooperation through dialogue and consultation. Separately, the ministry also said China's anti-subsidy investigations into EU imports are still ongoing.
平衡的原则，相互照顾，彼此合理关切。
Now we get the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Kremlin has said that remarks by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about US President Donald Trump left much to be desired and said Zelensky's approval rating was declining. Asked about Zelensky's remarks, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters that the rhetoric of Zelensky and many representatives of the Kyiv regime leaves much to be desired. Zelensky said that Donald Trump was trapped in a disinformation bubble and dismissed a false claim by the US president about his popularity rating being at 4%. The US President Donald Trump has said that his administration is focused on achieving global peace, particularly through a ceasefire in Ukraine and peace in the Middle East. At the F2 Priority Summit, he mentioned discussions with both Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky about peace efforts. Trump also thanked Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for hosting Ukraine peace talks. Trump criticized Zelensky for manipulating Biden and emphasized the need for peace talks and a ceasefire in Ukraine.
That he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. They'll never settle that war.
The Kremlin has said that any British plan to send troops to Ukraine as part of a potential peacekeeping mission would be unacceptable for Russia. The Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, said that the proposal was unacceptable because it would involve forces from a NATO member state and therefore have ramifications for Russia's own security. The Kremlin added that it was monitoring statements by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer with concern. The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, said that this week that Moscow views as a direct threat the idea of having NATO member troops on the ground in Ukraine, even if they operate there under a different flag. The U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has said that U.S. President Donald Trump intends to end the Ukraine conflict and believes all parties must accept his goal. Waltz added that Trump had informed several European counterparts of Washington's support for increasing their contributions to Ukraine's defense. Waltz also emphasized that the relationship between Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart is deteriorating, highlighting Trump's focus on a ceasefire and a broader agreement. That's almost all we have time for, but let's recap the main headlines this afternoon. The Red Cross receives the bodies of 4 Israeli detainees in Gaza and delivers them to Israel. The first batch of mobile homes enters Gaza and the 17th batch of Palestinian patients crosses Rafah. And Egypt and Spain call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza in a joint statement. Well, that's all for now, but I think you can follow Q News on your social media platform: YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EGY. Thank you very much for watching and have a lovely afternoon.